Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this series on Ahlul Bayt TV, The Psychology of Salah, which is a 10-part series. Inshallah, it will be loaded up online so that you can access it online. And in this series, we are looking at the different components of the Salah from a psychological perspective so that we can understand our prayer more deeply. So it isn't just a mechanical action that we do every day to fulfill a duty in Islam, but that actually we nourish our hearts, we nourish our souls, we understand what is going on in our minds as well. So we will take you through the different components of the prayer. So do keep watching. And again, my guest is Brother Ghulam Abbas Laka, who is going to take us through, inshallah, Niyyah and Takbir and other aspects, inshallah, in these coming programs. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind invitation. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I begin in the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have had the opportunity to think about what are the practical benefits that we may gain from Salah. So this is not about trying to increase the amount of things we have to do, but this is about getting more value, more benefit from what we are already doing with our Salah. So it's really the practical psychology of Salah that is our interest in this series. And to briefly recap, our discussion thus far has been all about the preparatory stages of Salah. So that connection that we may seek with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be established way before the formal prayer even begins. So we looked at the opportunities for connecting through wudu and also self-reflecting on different aspects of our thinking and our behaviors as we go through the process of the ablution of the wudu, and then the qibla and the different forms of orientation externally and internally. And then thirdly, the role of adhan and iqamah as knocking on that sacred door and becoming clear about the hope that is available of that falah, that harvesting of the success that is on offer for the individual to participate in. It's like you're being invited to a sacred banquet and there are many nourishing foods available to you to satiate different aspects of our hunger as human beings. Salah has many dimensions and each of them address specific aspects of what we may need. Our discussion today takes us up to the beginning now of the obligatory parts of Salah. So beginning with Niyyah, so our intention, and then secondly, Takbiratul Ihram, the first Allahu Akbar that begins the Salah. But let's begin at the beginning, which is our intention.
Yeah.
And when we look at the psychology of motivation and the clear correlations between motivation and achievement, not just in terms of our external lives and our careers, but also in terms of our psychology. So for instance, when we look at outcomes of people in psychotherapy, for conditions as anxiety, depression, etc., those who are motivated to actually implement the recommendations. So for example, with mindfulness interventions, with mindfulness treatment, those who are motivated to actually do the meditations several times a week, at least 3 times a week, find that they get better outcomes. And particularly with regard to relapse into depression. When we start thinking about other situations, such as in our everyday life, the greater motivation we have for something and the more clear we are about why we're doing something, the more likely we are to be successful. Right. Therefore, that might seem obvious, but it's remarkable how little we do it in our day-to-day lives. Theoretically, we know it, but practically we don't do it as much as we can, all too often. Which is why, for example, in psychology, when you're going through, let's say, a cognitive behavior therapy program, you would begin with goal setting. So what are the goals that you want to achieve with your therapist? And we do that in our own spiritual practice as well. Niyyah, which is essentially our goal setting, and the niyyah for Salah being qurbatan Allah, to achieve proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the how of it is important, because niyyah gets us to focus our attention like a laser beam, and not have it broad like a searchlight, sort of the energy dissipated over a broad area, but really bringing it down to something very clear. And if we can focus our niyyah like a laser beam, you know, you can do great things with lasers. You can heal, you can cure, you can cut out, you know, harmful things in our bodies, and you can remedy, but you can also carve a path for where you want to go. That's really the power of niyyah. And this is why we have a well-supported narration, a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his holy progeny, when he says, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَلِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى, that surely every action, all actions are contingent upon, are dependent upon their intention. Upon intention as a clear action. So this action is what determines the quality and the validity of all subsequent actions that are based upon it. And everyone will gain according to their intention. So the clearer your motivation and your reasoning for why you want to do something, the greater the value you will get out of it. What you put in is what you'll get out. But if you put in a very weak niyyah, we should not be surprised if what we get out is very weak as well. So for instance, if we go back to the example of a very busy person who only has 10 minutes for their midday prayer, and you know they have to do many other things during their limited lunch break, then one of the ways in which we can get quite a lot of value from a very quick action is niyyah. If we are really in that moment, and it only takes a moment, but if in that moment we take the opportunity to really focus on what we want to do, then we are shutting out all the other background noise of our lives. And in that moment of connection, we can really make a lot of progress very quickly. And this is where Imam Ali alayhi salam, a great example of someone who really harnessed the power of intention to achieve remarkable heights in salah, in terms of connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we see that celebrated in the Holy Quran as well, with regard to giving charity in the state of ruku', in the state of prostration. Now, one of the things he says, and this is narrated in different sources, for instance, Jami Sadat, he says, Allah, I do not worship you because I am afraid of you, nor do I worship because I want your heaven, just like a business transaction. But I do so, I worship because I have found that you ought to be worshipped. There's a normative aspect to this. I feel you ought to be worshipped, and that's why I worship. It is a free connection. And we notice that in the true loving connection between the beloved and the beloved, there is a freedom to it. And it is this freedom to shape your intention as to why you are doing this that determines the value of what you get thereafter. And therefore, we need to think of a bit deeper about the quality of this intention. That this goal-setting process that we have, how can we strengthen it? How can we improve what is available so that we go further in the journey that we intend to take? And this is where we can turn to the Psalms in Islam, the dua tradition, particularly from Sayfa Sajjadiyya, from Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, where in Dua Makarim al-Akhlaq, in the first stanza, he talks about something really powerful. He changes the notion of niyyah from being something binary to a continuum. So binary would be like a light switch. It's either on or it's off.
Right.
A continuum would be like a dimmer switch, where you can have it really dim or really bright. So he takes the notion of niyyah, of intention, into this dimmer switch mode, whereby he says, وَانْتَهِي بِنِيَّتِي إِلَىٰ أَحْسَنِ النِّيَّاتِ, that you, through your grace, he's praying to Allah, that through your grace, complete my intention through your, take my intention to the best of intentions. Wantahi, this verb has notions of movement. So it's about moving the dimmer switch. It's not about, oh, okay, either I have an intention or I don't.
Yeah.
It's not about that. This idea of wantahi bi niyyati. So take my intention ila ahsanin niyyat, to the best of intention. Now this tells us many things. Firstly, we can deepen our intention. It's possible. Secondly, that we can seek help for that process. And thirdly, that there are really high levels. This ahsanin niyyat is, we can have the intention to deepen our intention, like as a sort of, as a meta intention. So we can actually go quite deep into the psychology of niyyah. So as we are standing in our lunch break, about to start our salah, and we want to really get something from this experience, one of the ways of doing it is to really focus our niyyah, to bring all our faculties into that process of establishing what I'm doing, why I want to do it, and what I want to get out of it. Not just a legal tick box that, Sharan, I have to say my prayers 5 times a day, therefore I need to tick this box 5 times. No.
I mean, it's interesting because I've read in Nahj al-Balagha how Imam Ali alayhi salam, he talks about Yawm al-Qiyamah as the day that intentions will be weighed. So it makes me, you know, when you were saying that, obviously the salah depends upon our intention, and we need to have the right intention, and that actually on Yawm al-Qiyamah, you know, and the intention is an action, and that on Yawm al-Qiyamah, our intentions as actions are going to be weighed, assessed. Then what was crossing my mind was, okay, so that means our intentions are going to be judged. And this is, again, makes you pay attention to your intention. But then, you know, you mentioned Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam saying we could get help to perfect our intention.
Indeed. And niyyah has a force to it, that our intention has a force. And this is where, in psychology, when we think about our thinking, and when we clarify why we're thinking what we're thinking, we can distill out the negative, unhelpful thoughts, particularly the automatic negative thoughts. We can try and filter those out that often infect the quality of our niyyah. We don't aim to ahsanin niyyah, to the highest levels, because we feel we're not able to, that we're not good enough, that somehow those negative thoughts then come in and say, oh, no, you can't aim that high, you can only aim this much. We preclude ourselves from aiming for the stars, and we just limit ourselves, whereas actually niyyah has a value to it. And this is why we have the teachings that good intentions will themselves be credit-worthy on the Day of Judgment. That even if you weren't able, through your limited resources, you weren't able to fulfill and manifest through action your good intentions, you will still get rewarded for it. But this notion that you pick up on regarding getting help, I really want to build on that, because subsequently in Dua Makarim al-Akhlaq, Imam Zain al-Abidin Islam really seeks help for this, quite explicitly. And he says, Allahumma, calling to Allah, waffir, complete, bilutfika niyyati. So waffir, so complete, bilutfika, through your gentleness, through your kindness, through your loving nourishment. Lutf has so many aspects through it. So the Imam is asking for God's help asking for Allah's help through His lutf, through His kindness. For what? Allahumma waqfir bilutfika niyyati. Complete, strengthen, develop my intention through your grace. Lutf is a form of grace. So actually we can really think about niyyah as a dynamic force. And when we have done this, then we are ready to embark upon the second aspect of beginning salah, which is takbirat al-ihram. So when we have formulated a strong niyyah, we can stand on that stage and then proclaim Allahu Akbar, truly. And it is a shame that in the media the words Allahu Akbar have all these negative connotations about what people who clearly haven't understood Islam misattribute them to. But really each Muslim at the point of beginning their salah says Allahu Akbar. And it is incredibly beautiful in terms of what it serves as an opportunity to improve ourselves, to transform our experience of being human beings. And in that regard, when we look at the teachings of Takbirat al-Ihram, we're told that, so for instance, a psychological explanation of Takbirat al-Ihram is offered in Sirr al-Salah, Salat al-Arifin, in the text we were looking at previously. And in it, it is said that Takbir is like a veil, a third veil of mystery when you knock on the door of divinity. But it says, but do not consider yourself as the remover of that veil, or worthy to recite the magnification of Allah. Do not regard yourself as being worthy of that in the ultimate sense, for He is far greater than can be described. So that really, having formed the niyyah, we then actually surrender the active force. So at that point of Takbirat al-Ihram, we're now allowing a greater force, grace itself, to lead us. So that Takbirat al-Ihram, as that veil of separation is lifted, we are not the ones doing the lifting, but the door is opened for us when we knock. We're not pushing the door open. That would not be appropriate. All we can do is knock, and then the door is opened for us. So that Takbirat al-Ihram is the opening of that door. And therefore, it is a point where we really need to be present. And the teaching continues. It says, knock at the door of the Beneficent One, and from your heart acknowledge your reality. So all your faults, and say, O Beneficent One, the one whose sins has come to you. Now, this is not about doing ourselves down. No, far from it. Because really that knocking and that process of Takbirat al-Ihram is like a mini day of judgment, because we are judged in our entirety. But that, from a psychological point of view, the value of that is about acknowledging what is. It's not about denying. It's not about pretending to be other than who we are, because there are many teachings about how it's important not to be a hypocrite at that moment of Takbirat al-Ihram, because if other things are akbar in our lives rather than Allah, if other things are greater, like our sense of self, like the tyrant within us, we're like notions of social status, of whatever it might be, then we'll be found out in that moment. So this is an opportunity, really, at least 5 times a day, to look within, to engage in introspection. And introspection and self-reflection is a core part of most psychotherapy.
Yeah.
Here we have that ultimate opportunity in Takbirat al-Ihram to really look at who we are. And when we identify weaknesses, to seek help for that weakness to be remedied. This idea of wantahi bilutfik, waffir, to complete the deficiencies that we may have, so to rectify them, to fix them, to fix the problems. But if you are in a boat and you have holes in that boat, then when you're about to set sail, it's a good idea to recognize where the holes are. Because if you just set sail and pretend that the holes don't exist, then the boat is going to take on water pretty quickly. And often we find ourselves drowning in our lives, pretending that our boat is fine and everything's okay, but actually we're drowning. It's important to find the holes, plug those holes, and remove the water in our boats. That's what this represents.
I was going to say also that takes an element of responsibility as well. And human beings kind of sometimes want to avoid responsibility for those deficiencies. And this is another problem that perhaps, it perpetuates issues within ourselves, within the family, within the community. So rectifying ourselves is not just about rectifying our own selves, but it has a knock-on effect in the family, in the community, in the ummah as a whole.
And we mustn't for a moment pretend that any of these steps are easy.
Yeah.
They may be simple, but they're not simplistic. They may be very quick, but very difficult.
Yeah.
It's much easier to be on autopilot and just start the prayer and get on with it, rather than actually take that moment. It's just a moment, but what a moment it can be. Yeah. A moment of self-realization, really. But it can be scary, because it's about looking at that which may be uncomfortable to look at.
Yeah.
And to ask help for it. So, a fisherman might not want to acknowledge the hole in the boat. But until you do, that boat is likely to continue sinking.
Yeah.
And that fisherman might end up drowning as a result. And so the frequency of salah becomes important. And this is another aspect as to what we discussed at the outset, that why is it that salah has been spread throughout the day? We can't do all the 5 prayers in one go. There is a distribution throughout the day, so that for as long as we are conscious during the day and not asleep at night, we are at regular intervals stopping to look within, to engage in introspection.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to take long for it to be incredibly valuable, provided we are there, really present. And that's really the invitation. But because it's hard, when we look at the psychology of Takbir al-Ihram, one of the aspects we see is that, for example, when we raise our hands in Takbir, we can view that process as a form of priming. And priming really is an implicit memory effect in which exposure to one stimulus influences response to another. So the stimulus would be raising your hands in Takbir, but the other stimulus would be then that connection of what we are trying to do, that recognition of the self-reflection that needs to come with it. But if we haven't established those connections, then the priming will not have as important an effect.
Yeah.
It's like this. I mean, if you were to have a psychological experiment where you have somebody in a lab and you have a screen in front of them, if you hold up a picture of a banana and you're measuring response time, it might take a certain amount of time to recognize the image as a banana. But if you flash up the word yellow first and then put the picture of a banana, the reaction time will be much faster, because the person has been primed to, and the word yellow and the word banana are sometimes encoded together in our memory functions. So we're tapping into the way our memory is encoded. And so therefore, priming really can be a technique, a psychological technique to train how a person's memory can work, both in the positive and the negative sense. So, often a child who has been subjected to a lot of violence, a lot of slapping, then even if the person, maybe a parent, as soon as their demeanor changes, they might experience the effects and the stress associated with being hit.
Yeah.
Because the priming has had, and they've got a cue now.
Yeah.
That person's demeanor changes and you know what's coming next. But that can be turned into a positive as well. That Takbiratul Ihram, that first Allahu Akbar as we raise our hands, that can become a very helpful, adaptive, positive priming for us to serve as a mechanism for bringing into play all the things we know that can be helpful about Salah and all the things that we need to do in order to benefit. Principally, honestly reflecting upon who we are and openly seeking assistance from the grace of divinity to enable us to achieve our niyyah, our intention of proximity and achieving the fulfillment of the values that inspire us.
And also, I mean, this niyyah is not just sometimes, I mean, the way you read it in the books about what the niyyah should be, often they just say, you should make the intention that you are going to pray a certain number of raka'at. So it's not just qurbatan ila Allah, seeking nearness to Allah, but it's also...
Yes. 2 rakats of Fajr for...
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. No, but that specificity is helpful.
Yeah. So, I mean, and scholars have said you don't need to actually say it. You don't need to even think it out word by word. You can just have that intention in your heart. But yeah, I mean, and I think also this idea of, I mean, that's the technical thing, which means that your niyyah can end up becoming technical. Like, okay, my intention is to pray this number of raka'at, and then the qurbatan ila Allah becomes a kind of a afterthought. So I'm going to pray qurbatan ila Allah, and then you're starting your salah. But yes, I mean, to think about what am I seeking when I say qurbatan ila Allah? What is that experience of being near to Allah? What does that mean in my life?
And does it mean being away from something else? Away from our ego and all the constant worries and pressures that we're under.
Yeah.
There is an active movement here.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, the other day actually I was actually reflecting on that, qurbatan ila Allah. Well, what am I seeking when I say that? Because it's not just I feel it's not just a kind of a statement. Right, I'm doing this salah with the intention of getting nearness to Allah. The salah will sort that out for me. You know, the salah is going to bring me close to Allah. I haven't really got a clear idea of what that means, but anyway, that's what the salah is going to do. And the other day I thought to myself, but actually qurbatan ila Allah is is linked to a seeking of the heart. So actually I should be seeking that nearness to Allah when I'm going into the prayer. I'm not just making a statement that my prayer is going to bring me close to Allah, but rather that nearness comes from me, from desiring that nearness.
It's really interesting the way you phrase that, because it reminds me of what some of the texts talk about, whereby particularly some of the mystical texts on Salah, when they say that when you knock on the door during Takbir al-Ihram, open your heart so that you may be able to perceive the response of enter. So that you may be able to feel that connection, that when you've knocked, that you hear the call enter into that. So you are seeking.
Yeah.
But in that quest, there is a movement. And if we were to technically think about niyyah, I think it would be different to looking at it just ritually. I think I would characterize what you were saying as being ritual, because when we think about it technically, there really is a profound psychology to it that makes it an exercise in presence. But when we do it ritually, we may just go through the legal things that I need to say this, that, and the other. Okay, that's one level of it. But technically, that's not what it's about.
Yeah.
Technically, what the niyyah is about and the Takbir al-Ihram are about are knocking on the door appropriately, so that we may be ready, in a state that's ready to perceive the call of enter and to have that connection. Now, coming back to how this could help us with our mental health, practices in mindfulness, which is what this is one form of it, have been shown to be helpful. Now, of course, the research doesn't look at Islamic Salah as a practice, but when we look at many of the mental states of Salah, particularly the notion of deliberate awareness of our thoughts and consciously remaining diligent about one aspect of our recitation, the dhikr, and gently escorting any deviant, our mind when it goes off on different thoughts. In some of these books, they use the analogy of a bird that jumps from branch to branch, the bird of khayal, as they call it, jumps from branch to branch. But do not be seduced by that bird, but instead gently escort your attention back to the salah.
Right.
And that's really what we see in mindfulness therapies as well, that when different thoughts come into your mind, you gently come back to the practice, which might be a breathing practice in mindfulness therapy. In salah, we're coming back to the recitation, whatever the dhikr might be. But that workout, think of this as going to the gym 5 times a day to exercise the muscle of mindfulness and presence and self-reflection, honest self-reflection, but not in a self-defeating way, but in a hopeful way, that having identified that there is a leak, that there is a hole in my boat and there's a leak, I can fix it. That through the power of grace, I have the ability to fix it, and it can be fixed, and my boat can be seaworthy. But I need to have that process of checking within at regular intervals. That's
a good point you make about also gently bringing one's attention back, because I have read that as a method where, you know, because our thoughts can wander, as soon as you notice that your thoughts are wandering, you bring it back into, you know, the concentration on the salah.
Yes.
But sometimes you might think, you might do that in a self-reprimanding way.
Yes.
Like,
we don't need to scold
salah.
ourselves.
Yeah.
Because remember, the salah, we begin with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And in the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful. So where is the rahmah in being harsh with ourselves? So we need to, with rahmah, with compassion, escort our thoughts back to what we're doing. Like you would gently bring a toddler back to the path that you're walking on the footpath. That toddlers often go off on the side. But you wouldn't scold it harshly. You would gently, with love and compassion, bring it back to the path. And that changes how we relate to ourselves. If we forget that salah is parameterized by rahmah, is circumscribed, is in the circle of the rahmah of Allah, then it changes the way we treat ourselves during that salah. And that might provide an example for us of how we should treat ourselves outside the salah as well. And maybe treat other people as well with that rahmah. And rahmah doesn't mean it's okay to do harmful things. No. But it means that we can be compassionate in how we seek to bring about reform. Islah, that reformation of ourselves. Islah fi ummati jaddi was the rallying call of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, the reformation of the community of my grandfather. But that was a manifestation of infinite compassion that Imam Hussain alayhi salam demonstrated in how he sought about to bring that change. And there is a lesson for us in our salah in how to do that. It is also not by coincidence that Imam Hussain alayhi salam gave so much emphasis to salah on the day of Ashura.
True.
In Karbala. That salah is integral to what his mission was all about. And salah, true islah is a part of salah. That true transformation, reformation is a part of salah. And Takbir al-Ihram is the first gate of that. That moment of self-analysis, of recognizing who is knocking at that door.
Thank you very much. Again, some very good insights into that, which inshallah will be of great benefit to our viewers, and again, ignite some thinking about their salah, our salah that we are doing. Inshallah, we'll get more out of doing our salah. So thanks for watching, and inshallah, we will see you in the next program. Again, just to remind our viewers, this is a series of 10. You can access them also online. So do keep watching. Inshallah, we will see you in the next program. Assalamu alaikum.